Hello, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Carrie and Dani. Um, I just wanted to start, if you don't mind, Carrie, with just I don't think I explained myself very well in our last video when I went through and read through the comments that some of the people made. Um, my intention wasn't to critique the Bible story or anything like that. It was just I wanted to share my surprise that my understanding was so different in some places to what actually was in the Bible. And so I'm an adult and I want to take full responsibility. I was like, I'm sorry, part of me wants to go, oh, I've been lied to. But I want to take full responsibility for any misunderstandings. I'm adult. I'm perfectly capable of going back and rereading the Bible stories and realizing that the impression I had of some of them was wrong.
Hmm.
However, because I didn't know it was wrong, I didn't realize I had to reread them.
Yeah.
So that was all. So I mean, um, and I guess I know we said something about David and Bathsheba and stuff last week, but that's such a big one. I was just thinking this week about something slightly easier in my mind, and I was thinking about the story of Esther.
Yes.
Um, and I guess because to me, Esther was always like the Cinderella Bible story.
Yes. Yep.
You know, you've got the orphan and the lovely uncle, and then God brings her to the notice of the king. There's the fairy tale marriage to get to the king. You get to be, really important. And at the right moment in time, when evil people are doing wrong, you get to magically save God's people and be a hero. I mean, if that's not a Cinderella story, what is? But I know that you've been reading through the Bible and re-looking at the actual details of some of the things and how they're different
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
some of the things we just grew up believing. So I actually didn't go and reread the Book of Esther, even though we were talking about some of these things last week, because I wanted to be surprised with what you've got to say, or
Yeah.
not. We'll see what happens.
Well, my first, I think everybody, if you grew up Adventist, this was probably your first exposure to
Yep,
the
I got
Esther
that.
story. This picture is of Mordecai taking little Hadassah back to his house. And this one's very lovely. It's very, it's pretty true to it. Obviously you want to keep things age appropriate, and in the Bible sometimes that can be hard, so um they kind of gloss over, so, some more of the well, and here's a picture of lovely Esther. She is, let's see, it's hard to work with in the
I
camera.
can see that.
She's this lady right here. Look how she automatically looks like. I mean, and of course, these pictures were done in like what, the 60s is what it looks like, so all of a sudden she looks like she's 35. But anyway,
Yep.
um,
That's true, actually. She did look quite old in those pictures.
she did.
I've never stopped to think about how old she actually was. We're going to cover that at some point.
We'll talk about that. So this
Hmm.
one's pretty. I mean, it's age appropriate. I don't see anything that's really, red flaggy as far as deceitful as far as what the now coming to our Bible story. And what's interesting is she's always wearing yellow, which I thought was just weird. She's, everything she's just aside. I don't know what that means. I have no idea. So, story two. So, and we all know the story of Esther, right? She's an orphan. She's raised by her cousin Mordecai. Um, and I'm just going to pick up where it said, where it talks about when she goes to the king's palace. Okay. Um, and this is when the decree is or written where they're going to go and get women from all over the world, the known world at this time, to come and audition for the part of the queen, right? And says there must have been a lot of excitement in Persia these days. Every girl from India to Ethiopia in all 127 provinces of the empire was talking about the king's search for a new queen. Everyone hoped she would be the one chosen, and yet you may be sure that every mother was certain her daughter was the most worthy for this high honor. By the king's command, contests or the like were held in every province, and the loveliest girls were given a free trip to Shushan for the king's inspection. Sounds lovely, doesn't it?
I can
And
see where my Cinderella story came from.
yes, as
And
more
the thing is,
and more girls arrived at the palace, Mordecai had an idea. Why, his Esther was far more beautiful than any of these young ladies from Syria, Egypt, Arabia, and other parts of the country. They didn't stand a chance beside his precious little star, which is what Esther means, a star. They weren't in the same class. Esther was far and away the best looking girl in the world. I'm sure you could win, he told her one day after seeing some of the latest arrivals, because of course he worked in the palace, so he's looking at all the
yeah.
girls as they go by. You're so much lovelier than some of the others. Why not try and see what happens? It could be that God wants you to be queen. Finally, Esther agreed, and Mordecai took her to the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, the keeper of the women. As Mordecai bade her goodbye, he added one word of caution. Don't tell anyone you're a Jewess. That might spoil everything. In this one, Mordecai delivers Esther of his own free will to the king.
See,
And
again, I
it's
know
built as this lovely beauty
yeah.
contest.
Yep. And I was gonna say it's a and I understand still that it's my responsibility as an adult to go and reread the stories.
Yeah,
But it's really hard. Okay, and I don't know if we've talked about this before. So if you're told from the moment you're born that that's yellow,
right.
it's really hard to ever see that it's actually shades of green because there is yellow in green.
Hmm.
And so I guess that's the struggle I found after leaving the Adventist church or even growing up in it or after leaving was to go back and read stories and see things differently to what was told was there. So I don't know about you, but I went to church every week and I went through the church youth group Pathfinders. I went to church school. I never attended a state school until I went to university to do my bachelor's degree
Me
in my
too.
mid 30s. So and stuff. So I mean, it's just layers on layers on layers. And every time I read the story of Esther, I always saw what I was told was there.
Right. Well, and there's so much that in some of the research that I've done, there's so much that you can extrapolate in the silence. Is
Yeah.
what they literally says the silence and what do you as what we know about what we're learning what you can learn about the Persian culture and how life was. I mean, it was an extremely brutal time. I read, where did I write that down? I feel there we go. I read somewhere at this during this time per year 500 castrated boys were sent to the Persian court per year.
Whoa.
So it's not just the women, of course, we're and Jewish scholars are thinking that at this time, when it says young virgins, they're meaning somebody around pubescent age, not fully mature. Okay, so probably what, 14, 15 maybe, maybe
Um,
13.
oh, I was just thinking that my understanding from what I've read of the culture back then, a lot of them were married by 12 to 14. So
Yeah.
potentially you could be looking at 10,
And then
10
I
to
just
12.
want to on it as a side, if you've read this, I do like this book. This is by Trudy Morgan Cole. It's published by the Review and Herald. And I think she does a pretty good job of honoring the biblical story, but also bringing in um, side stuff about the culture and everything. So obviously it's a novel, loosely based on a biblical story, but I think that this probably more clearly portrays more than likely what was really going on, that it wasn't a beauty contest. I mean, it was women from all over the known world, and I grabbed a screenshot. Let's see, how do I do that again? I'm just going to share my screen really quick. So can you see that, Dani?
Yep.
So this purple. is the Persian Empire.
It was
So
huge back then, wasn't it?
huge back then. So there were girls brought from, and I'm not going to say women because these were girls, were all brought to Shushan to audition. They were treated to um 12 months of what they called beauty treatments, 6 months at least of treatment with myrrh. Myrrh is also, I don't know if you realize this, Danny, but myrrh at the time was, there's evidence to suggest was used as birth control.
Oh, no, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
why would they be needing birth control before they even got to the whole
Not sure. Don't know if they were given lessons on how to be with the king, or if it took that long to build it up so that way he wouldn't be getting the girls pregnant during their
I
audition.
guess for the ones that he wasn't keeping, 'cause I mean, I did some reading into it, and it wasn't just a beauty pageant. I mean,
And they
he,
were all kept. When they went through and they had one night with the king, they didn't
yeah.
get to go back home. They were in the first harem, which is where the younger ones were being trained and everything. And then once they were done, they went to the second harem and they became a concubine. Some of them more than likely never saw the king again, but they were the king's women and they couldn't go home. So imagine at 14 years old, knowing that this is happening to you. This is not a fun, Miss Sousa pageant. So the girls knew, I don't think that they were ignorant or naive enough to realize, to not know, have some vague idea of what was going to happen to them.
Well, I mean, most of them grew up with animals, so they had some idea of what sex looked like.
Right. But as far as the basically imprisonment for the rest of their lives, um,
I'm not convinced, and I did a little bit of reading this morning,
mhm,
um, and I'm not convinced that I'm not convinced that any of them went willingly. I don't actually believe they traveled to go to a beauty pageant. I don't think, reading into the space, I don't think a lot of them even wanted to be there. They weren't given any choice.
right. Well, and they didn't, young girls at that time didn't get choices.
No.
I don't think. I mean, and there was one of the articles that I was reading, just talked about comparing it to a lot of the human trafficking that went on, or is still going on, or went on during the slave trade, when girls and women, everybody was captured and taken wherever their captors said. They didn't have a say in what happened to them.
Yeah.
And just it's not as feel good of a story as we would all hope it would be, So I also pulled out my SBL study Bible, which is a fairly new release, and they have a lot of notes just about what when the book was written. Um, so it talks about says the of course there's always the controversy of what books belong in the Bible, which ones don't. Um,
Mm.
Rabbis, because of course this is in the Old Testament, noted that the name of God is never mentioned in the book. There are no copies of the book found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Protestant reformer Martin Luther famously wished the Bible had, or the book had never been written and dubbed it full of pagan naughtiness.
I did not know Martin Luther said that.
I didn't know that till this morning when I got this out. And there's a good reason to believe that the book was written at least 80 years after the time it uh, describes.
So
And the introduction to the book, it also says women face severe limits and risks, and even queens could find themselves subject to the whims of powerful men, and which is this whole book is about the whims of a powerful man, really. Um, they mention the literary genre and context because there's usually arguments as far as the books of the Bible, what genre they belong to. Are they poetry? Are they history? Are they law? Um, I underlined this as some scholars suggest the book is a kind of literature called burlesque. This form often takes on a tone of false dignity and employs features such as exaggeration, caricature, coincidences, and surprising reversals.
Okay.
I know. And then I read another that article this I think one of the articles you sent me. Um she has an argument that the book is more of a horror genre than burlesque.
I did read that, and especially they said if you were of African descent and stuff, and they talked about the sex trafficking and stuff through there into the Persian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, that was talking about the people that aren't mentioned. Esther gets the starring role
Mm-hmm.
in the book, but there's all the unmentioned people that are implied. You don't have a beauty pageant of one.
Yeah. Well, and another theme of this book is that of proportion. This is perhaps best illustrated by its negative examples. Ahasuerus's excesses are obvious from the opening chapter. Yet even Ahasuerus is an amateur next to Haman, who responds to a slight by planning a genocide. In contrast to these characters, Esther and her guardian slash cousin, Mordecai, respond to life's challenges in a much more balanced way. But she's extremely cautious, but her caution is proportional to the danger. Um, and there's a lot of, they say, coincidences, which is actually, evidence of the Lord working, even though the Lord is not mentioned in this book of Esther. So
So,
I think I think to me what was most startling in just reviewing the Bible story, I read through it this morning. I read through the SBL study notes. I glanced through the Bible story, the blue books, and stopped basically when I saw that Mordecai that every all of the girls were so excited to go. And I think that that just shows, I don't know, a lack of understanding as to what exactly is going on there. Maybe also, dare I say, normalizing a Cinderella approach to the Book of Esther, to where little girls are so excited to be Esther and to win this beauty contest. But yet, how many with the beauty contest all throughout the world, the different types of human trafficking, how many times are girls so excited to be chosen by a man? That gets them in trouble,
yeah,
you know? It- so just, I mean, just thoughts about that. There's so many thoughts just kind of swirling around in my head. Sometimes it's hard to
yeah.
pin it down.
I mean, again, I'm thinking I probably didn't express myself really well in our last week's thing. But hey, that's what happens when you just record live and don't edit it.
Hmm.
And it's just I understand, I mean, thinking back, I can remember being told, oh, the Book of Esther is really important because it shows how God can use people in every circumstance. But to think that, God had to put someone there and use somebody and then, rest. There's no great story about the power of God other than the Jews being saved if all that's happening is God's redeeming life, Esther's life from a beauty pageant.
Hmm.
I think it takes away from the value of the story in some ways as well. Whereas the story, really, when you look into it, becomes a story of, wow, really, really, really awful shit can happen, just as bad as what happens today. And
Yep.
God doesn't condone it.
Mm-mm.
Um, the story shouldn't be told in such a way that minimalizes it so that people think, oh, it's actually okay for men to run around doing these things. Um,
Hmm.
because that's not what's actually written there.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and then we don't know. I mean, if it wasn't in any of those things, we don't even know how much worse the story might have been. It might have already been whitewashed a few times.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's there's so much that
Mm.
between the lines, if you read between the lines, you can make it as horrible
Mm.
or as just ambivalent, you know?
Um, I guess part of what annoys me is when I look about how the story was taught to me and what I always grew up with, and I hadn't thought about this till right now, really. But when I say I hadn't thought about it, I mean, impressions and things are just layered into who you are and how you approach life and what you believe about things.
Hmm.
It's not till you start to, disentangle some of those things out that you're left with what is. And I guess talking to you now about it, I am annoyed. I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed that I spent so much of my life without really examining the story closely, without pulling the story apart a bit more. I'm annoyed that I just swallowed the fairy tale story. But in the fairy tale story, only a beautiful person could have rescued you know, only a beautiful person could have rescued the whole Jewish nation and saved the whole world, the
Hmm.
whole important world through which Jesus and God then became. I mean, when you read the story, it's just like there's no ugly heroes in there, is there?
No, and I mean, it's kind of a conflicting story. It's like why did God have to do it this way? Wasn't there another way he could have saved the Jewish nation? Why did it have to be that's just plays in my head right now. And part of the study notes from the SBL study Bible seems to indicate that they believe that there could be a little bit of exaggeration in some of this as far as length of time and different things. And that's something to consider. I don't think it's um a hill to die on, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
but there's certainly a reason it was put in the Bible. I'm not sure, it's shows God's awesome power in using, and I did see in here, I think they think it was like a 4-year
Mm.
process
Yeah.
from when Vashti was disposed and Esther became queen.
Yeah. Um, I guess so. I'm still trying to pull out the things that are annoying me. It's just got
Mhm.
this vaguely uncomfortable feeling, and I'm trying to figure out what it's exactly attached to. And part of I'm realizing as you talk, Carrie, that part of my uncomfortable feeling is that, and maybe it's just where I grew up, is that I feel that the story was told in a way, the story was told in a way as to convey that, not only that beauty is important, but that's okay because beautiful things are important. I've got nothing against things that are beautiful. I mean, I've got horses, they're beautiful. Um, I've got a flower garden, they're beautiful. But I feel the story was always sold to me in a way that it glorified the benefits as doing as I was told.
Yes.
This is what happens. If you do as you're told and you don't upset people. And yes, she did do something that she wasn't told by going in to see the king. But, before she did this one thing that she wasn't asked to do, which could be scary, wasn't necessarily a wrong, not that she had been ordered not to do it. It was just to go against the Vedic culture of the day, which I know is a big thing, but still,
Hmm.
it was just it was told in a way that was like, this is what can happen if you do as you're told. And if you're not going to do as you're told and be a good girl, it's always really important to be a good girl growing up an Adventist, then you should pray for many, many months before you do anything that might be considered not correct. and be
Hmm.
really, really sure that God wants you to not do that correct thing. Otherwise, don't do it because you got to be a good girl. I just, I just feel the story was used for things that maybe it wasn't originally intended. Um,
Yeah.
in my life anyway. I don't know about other people's lives, but I mean, I get that feeling out of a lot of the Bible stories. And I know last week we mentioned once or twice David and Bathsheba, and I mean, I don't know if we'll discuss that at a later date or not, but that story was certainly told to me as it was her fault.
Hmm.
You need to be covering yourself up and not tempting men because they can't help themselves.
Well, and I
And
did
it's just,
see,
there's
uh,
undertones I feel
mhm.
of that through this story. I don't know how to put it into words. It's just,
And
makes
I
me
saw a
slightly
story,
uncomfortable.
an article too about Esther, and they seem to hint that they believe that Esther was complicit in committing adultery. I mean, she was like probably a 14 or 15-year-old girl who, if she refused, would have been killed.
Well, hey, she didn't go to the same Pathfinder club as me because we were taught from when we were 12 or 13 years old about the Fox's Book of Martyrs. And, you know, it's an honor to be killed for God. Did she miss that part? I mean, they certainly taught us that at Pathfinders. Didn't they teach you that at church?
Mm, yeah, probably. Probably. I probably blocked it out a little bit.
We
But
need to expect in the end times to be martyred and killed for God. And we know you're going to get to heaven if it happens. You shouldn't be scared of it.
hmm.
Who forgot to tell Esther?
Right.
Obviously, she needed some Ellen White books.
She did. Oh, and speaking of Ellen White, I decided to look to see what she had to say about Esther. And there's not much, honestly. I was kind of disappointed at there just wasn't anything. But how is Ellen White going to address the whole story of Esther, the theme of the audition of to be queen? That's certainly not anything she would want to talk about. But in Prophets and Kings, page 605, um, Ellen White basically used the story of Esther to remind us. She says Satan will arouse indignation against the minority who refuse to accept popular customs and traditions. Men of position and reputation will join the lawless and the vile to take counsel against the people of God. And it continues. And then with voice and pen by threats, boast, threats, and ridicule, they will seek to overthrow their faith. By false representations and angry appeals, men will stir up the passions of the people, not having a thus says the scriptures to bring against the advocates of the Bible Sabbath, they will resort to oppressive enactments to supply the lack. So, and to secure popularity and patronage, legislatures will yield to the demand for Sunday laws. So, in the middle of Prophets and Kings, she decides to talk about the Sunday law because that's important.
Okay. Because it's,
That was the
uh,
point of the story, right?
yeah, I missed that bit in Esther's book of Esther, but clearly
Important.
it's a yeah, clearly it's a prophetic story pointing to the end of the world. Yep, got it.
Yep. Yep.
Again,
We are
one
fluent in
more
sarcasm
layer
here,
of me
folks.
being told I need to one more layer added to the whole story of the book of Esther's about not only how it's important that I'm beautiful, but that I do as I'm told.
Yep.
Because I might be able to save the world one day if I'm beautiful and do as I'm told.
Yes. You must
If
do as you're
I'm
told, except for
pleasing
one
to the
instance.
important men in my life, I can
Right.
save the world.
But if you decide not to be obedient, you need to pray for and fast for 3 days before you do it to make sure it's what you're supposed to do. But I mean, I do appreciate the story of Esther. I mean, I think that it's um one that if you focus on really what it's about, it is the power of God to save his people. Regardless of circumstance, he chose to do that with a very young Jewish girl. But I think the mixed messages that we get, it's easy to lose that and to lose the humanity of these poor women that were caught up in all of this.
So, okay, when you so that was one you just reminded me of one of the things I wanted to
Yeah.
say about this. Okay. was that the story I got growing up was always that about God put her there. So if God put her there, it has to be the lovely beauty pageant story. Because, you know, what's the alternative? The alternative is that God deliberately sent her somewhere. God deliberately put a vulnerable person into an environment where she was the equivalent of these days of being sent off to be a sex slave in a human trafficking ring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's part of where the story of Esther has been told to me or sold and told to me in a way that's really important, that it's understood that it was wrong because I don't believe that God did deliberately put her there. I think the story isn't that God sends somebody that's vulnerable to be sex trafficked and um, forced into an adulterous situation and then basically raped by a king they have to sleep with whether they want to or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anyone listening to our video has lived through these things, they'll understand the trauma of even considering that God made these things happen. I think it's really a story of how, if it's told correctly and all the details are included, including what we know about the character of God, it's a story of how God can use the highly traumatized in powerful ways.
Yes, I like that. That's good. And that's
I,
something that I've really struggled with, reading through the Old Testament and stuff is like there's so much killing and yucky stuff. Just a lot of yucky stuff in the Bible, I'm like, oh,
so we're going to run out of time soon, but I
yes.
just want to say that again. I just want to say that again.
Yes.
Again, I'm not a Bible scholar. This is just what I believe. And I believe that if all the details in this book of Esther are told and shared correctly,
Hmm.
and if you're listening to this and you've been through a lot of trauma, if you know any trauma, not just the sort that Esther went through, but if you have post-traumatic
Hmm.
stress disorder or complicated versions of post-traumatic stress disorder or any of those things, it does not stop God from being able to work in your life to bring about good.
Yeah.
And it definitely does not mean that he planned for those things to happen. The fact is that evil is in the world. Evil's in the world and shit happens.
Yeah.
But even out of, yeah, your trauma does not disqualify you from God being able to use you.
Yeah.
Maybe not to save a whole nation, but to still be able to impact positively the lives of the people that you come in contact with. Um,
Absolutely. Very
I
well
used to
stated.
work with traumatized women, and I know that they often felt powerless to bring about change or to impact anyone's lives for good, even their kids or anything. And that's not true. And if all of Esther's story is told with the gory details and the horrible bits, not just the Cinderella version of it, then it is actually a story of hope for people that have lived through terrible things.
Yeah. And the more people who speak out about the trauma and use their voices, the louder those voices get, and the more change can happen, because many people silently live through trauma, don't want to share what happened to them, and because they think they're the only ones. But the reality is, I don't think there's probably anybody in this world that has lived through a trauma that other people haven't lived through, you know, broadly speaking. So,
So yeah.
broadly speaking. So, yeah, everybody just please remember God can use you, even if you lived through such the horrible trauma that Esther did. I mean, the absolute stress she must have felt going to speak to the king, knowing her life could be on the line at any moment, the lives of her friends, the lives of her family. But yet her voice was heard and changes were made. Um, Thanks everybody for listening. Please like and subscribe. Comment if you have any stories you'd like to share. Please comment those as well, and we'd love to hear from you. Um, for now, have a great day, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.